I can still hear their voices, faint whispers in the wind, calling out for help. But I never did anything when I could have. I should have stopped them, should have told someone, but I didn't. Now, when I think back, I can't escape the memory of what happened to those girls, my friends, my classmates, and how one by one, they disappeared into darkness. It started one rainy night. I was walking back to the dormitory after a long study session, the rain soaking through my uniform. I was tired and just wanted to go to bed. But as I passed the main gate, I saw something that made my heart stop. There, under the flickering streetlight, were the school's uniforms, the green skirts, the white blouses, the school blazers, laying on the ground. But there were no girls around. No one in sight. Just the abandoned uniforms, torn and filthy, scattered like they had been tossed aside. And then, I saw something worse, a pair of shoes, heels, sticking out from behind the bushes, lifeless and still. I ran to them, thinking someone was hurt, but there was nothing. No one. Just the shoes, the uniforms, and the smell of something I couldn't quite place. It was as though whatever happened to them had already moved on, leaving only the remains of something once whole. The teachers said nothing. The school staff acted like nothing had happened. But I knew. I knew what was happening to the girls, because I saw it, heard it, and later. I felt it too. The trouble started with Mr. Okoro. He wasn't like the other teachers. He was younger, in his 30s, with a smile that was too charming for someone in authority. He always seemed too friendly with the girls, pulling them aside after class, offering them rides to town, complimenting them too much. At first, we thought it was harmless, just a teacher being nice. But the way he made them laugh, the way they seemed so excited to be around him, it made me uneasy. And when they started leaving school late at night, disappearing for hours, that's when I started to question it all. One evening, I saw Titi and Ngozi walking out of the dormitory after lights out. I had no idea where they were going. But there was Mr. Okoro, waiting by the school gate, his car parked just outside. He waved them in, and they smiled back at him like it was nothing unusual. I thought it was strange, but didn't say anything. After all, they were just a couple of girls going out for a good time, right? But that night, when I went back to the dormitory, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, Titi was back in school, but she looked different. Tired, like she hadn't slept. She had a strange kind of glow in her eyes, like she was high on something I couldn't understand. She was smiling, but it wasn't a real smile. It was empty. And it wasn't just her. Mary and Chika, other girls who'd gone out with Mr. Okoro, looked the same. They weren't themselves anymore. As the weeks went by, I started hearing rumors. Some of the girls who'd gone out with Mr. Okoro weren't coming back to school at all. They were just gone. And those who did return were different. They had bruises, dark circles under their eyes, and they were quieter. But the strangest thing was their stories. They'd come back with strange tales of rich men who waited for them at nightclubs, men who bought them drinks and whispered in their ears. Mr. Okoro would be there too, laughing with these men, making sure the girls were always entertained. But it didn't stop there. The worst part was what the girls didn't say, what they couldn't say. They had changed. They weren't the same girls who once sat beside me in class. They'd seen something, felt something, that I wasn't part of. Something I couldn't touch. One night, I decided to follow them. I had to know. I couldn't live with the fear that I was missing out on something I didn't understand. So, after the bell rang and everyone was supposed to be in their rooms, I sneaked out and hid behind the school gate. I saw them again, Titi, Ngozi, and some others. They were in their school uniforms, but they were heading straight to Mr. Okoro's car. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the way they giggled, the way they kept looking around nervously, I knew something wasn't right. Mr. Okoro drove them out of the school compound, and I followed them at a distance. The drive was long, and I didn't recognize the area we ended up in. It was a nightclub, loud music spilling out from the door. And as soon as the girls stepped out of the car, the men inside, older men, welcomed them with open arms. The kind of men who wore expensive clothes, the kind of men who looked at them like they were just toys, to be played with. I stayed hidden in the shadows, watching in horror as the girls, who should have been at school, walked into that nightclub. Some of them were laughing, but I could see it in their eyes, they were terrified. But they were too far gone to stop. They had already crossed a line I wasn't ready to understand. The next morning, one of the girls didn't come back. Her name was Nina. She was one of the prettiest in our class, and she had always been so smart, so focused. But she had been going out with Mr. Okoro too. The other girls said she'd been picked up by a man that night. No one had seen her since. And that was when everything started falling apart. Days passed, and more girls started getting sick. Fever, weakness, rashes. Some of them went to the hospital, and when the results came back, they were devastating. HIV. AIDS. Some didn't survive. Others tried to keep it a secret, but the whispers were everywhere. I heard from one of the nurses at the clinic that the girls had been exposed to the virus by the men they had been meeting. The same men who had paid Mr. Okoro to bring them there, to use them. I was terrified, but it wasn't until I saw another girl, Doris, lying dead in the schoolyard with her uniform on, her eyes wide open, staring into nothing, that I realized how deep this had gone. We never saw Mr. Okoro again. No one ever found him. Some said he'd been fired, others said he'd disappeared. But the damage had been done. The school was in chaos. The girls who survived were left broken, some too sick to speak, others so traumatized they couldn't even leave their rooms. As for me, I couldn't forget what I saw. What I didn't stop. I couldn't sleep without seeing those girls, their hollow eyes, their broken bodies. I should have said something. I should have told the authorities. Yet painful, not everything is what it seems. Be careful who you trust, especially when they seem too good to be true. Sometimes, the ones who look like they're helping you are the ones leading you into darkness. And once you cross that line, it's hard to come back. Those girls paid the price, and so did I. For every night I stayed silent, for every moment I let my fear hold me back, I had to live with the consequences. The consequences of not speaking up, of not protecting those who needed it the most. Sometimes, I wonder if they are still out there, those girls, calling to me from the dark. I should have saved them, but I didn't.